The moment Patricia Henderson stepped onto my dock at 7:30 in the morning with her designer clipboard and her pearl necklace catching the Florida sun, I knew my peaceful Saturday was about to turn into something completely ridiculous. I was standing on my boat lift, wrench in hand, tightening the bolts on the pulley system that hoisted my 24-foot Grady white fishing boat out of the water. The lift was a beautiful piece of engineering, all gleaming stainless steel and hydraulic precision, positioned perfectly at the end of my dock, extending into the crystalline waters of Tampa Bay. I had installed it myself 3 months ago, and it had already saved me thousands in bottom paint and maintenance. "Excuse me," Patricia called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the sound of pelicans diving for mullet. "Are you Aaron Langford?" I wiped my hands on my work jeans and climbed down from the lift, squinting at her through the morning glare. "That's me. Can I help you?" She adjusted her oversized sunglasses and thrust a printed document toward me. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Sunset Cove Homeowners Association. I'm here to inform you that your boat lift is in direct violation of our community aesthetic standards and must be removed within 30 days. I stared at her, then at the document, then back at her. "I'm sorry, what? Your boat lift?" She gestured at it with obvious distaste, as if I had erected a carnival ride instead of a standard piece of marine equipment. "It's an eyesore. Multiple residents have complained that it obstructs their view of the bay and diminishes their property values. The HOA board held an emergency meeting, and we voted unanimously that it must go." I took the document from her hands and scanned it quickly. Sure enough, it was an official notice citing sections of the HOA covenant about maintaining visual harmony and prohibiting structures that create aesthetic disruption. The language was vague and clearly written by someone who thought legal jargon made them sound important. "This is my property," I said slowly, trying to keep my tone civil. "I own this house and I own this dock. I checked all the permits with Hillsborough County before installing the lift. Everything is legal and up to code." Patricia's smile was the kind that never reached her eyes. "Mr. Langford, when you purchased your home in Sunset Cove, you agreed to abide by our HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Those supersede your personal preferences. The boat lift creates visual clutter that impacts the entire community. Several homeowners can see it from their lanais, and frankly, it's just tacky." I felt my jaw tighten. I had lived in this waterfront community for 5 years, paying my HOA dues like clockwork, attending exactly 0 board meetings because I had better things to do with my time, and generally minding my own business. My house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch with weathered blue siding and a stone pathway leading down to my dock. I had bought it specifically for the water access. I was a marine mechanic by trade, and fishing was the only thing that kept me sane after long weeks of rebuilding boat engines and dealing with entitled yacht owners. "Patricia," I said, keeping my voice level, "this lift is a standard fixture in waterfront properties. Half the houses on this canal have boat lifts. Why is mine suddenly a problem?" "Those other lifts are smaller and less obtrusive," she replied primly. "Yours extends significantly higher and is visible from multiple properties. The board has determined that it negatively impacts the community character we've worked so hard to maintain." I glanced down the canal. 3 houses down, the Mitchells had a massive 2-post lift holding a 30-foot center console that towered over everything like a monument to excess. 2 houses in the other direction, the Rodriguez family had a 4-post lift with a pontoon boat that was permanently covered in a bright green tarp. Neither of those seemed to bother anyone. "This is selective enforcement," I said, handing the document back to her. and I'm not removing anything. My lift is legal, permitted, and within my property rights. Patricia's expression hardened. Then you leave us no choice but to pursue legal action. The HOA has the authority to place liens on properties that remain in violation. We can also assess daily fines until compliance is achieved. I strongly suggest you reconsider. She turned on her expensive heels and marched back down my dock, her clipboard swinging like a weapon at her side. I watched her climb into her white Mercedes SUV and drive away, leaving me standing there with grease on my hands and a growing sense of dread in my stomach. I spent the rest of Saturday trying to enjoy my day, but Patricia's visit had poisoned my mood. I took the Grady White out for a few hours, running south toward the Skyway Bridge, hoping the wind and salt spray would clear my head. The Gulf of Mexico was unusually calm, the water a deep blue that stretched to the horizon. I caught a few mangrove snapper and released them, not really in the mood to clean fish. By the time I got back, the sun was setting in spectacular fashion, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if I weren't so annoyed. I secured the boat on the lift and hit the switch, watching as the hydraulic system smoothly raised the hull out of the water. The engineering was satisfying, the way everything worked together with mechanical precision. It was exactly the kind of practical beauty that someone like Patricia Henderson would never understand. Sunday morning brought another visitor, though this one was considerably more welcome. My neighbor, Marcus Chen, came walking down the seawall path carrying 2 cups of coffee from the local shop. Marcus was a software engineer who worked from home, and we had bonded over our mutual appreciation for getting up early and avoiding people as much as possible. "Heard you had a visit from the HOA president," Marcus said, handing me one of the coffees. It was black, no sugar, exactly how I liked it. "News travels fast," I replied, taking a grateful sip. "Patricia was making calls all day yesterday." Marcus leaned against the seawall, looking out at the water. "She's got it in her head that your boat lift is ruining the neighborhood ambience or something. She tried to get me to sign a petition." "Did you?" "Hell no. I told her I don't care what you do with your property as long as it's legal." "Which it is, right? Completely. I've got all the county permits and everything was inspected." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at me. "Why now? I've had this lift for 3 months. Nobody said anything when I was installing it." Marcus shrugged. "You know how HOAs are. Someone gets a bug up their rear about something, and suddenly it's a community crisis." "My guess. Patricia's bored. Her kids are grown, her husband travels for work half the time, and she's got nothing better to do than police everyone else's lives. That's depressing." "Welcome to suburban Florida, my friend." We stood there in companionable silence for a while, drinking our coffee and watching a manatee surface near the opposite shore. The morning was peaceful, the kind of quiet that made you remember why you paid the outrageous insurance and property taxes to live near the water. "You going to fight it?" Marcus asked eventually. "I don't know. Depends on how hard they push. Just be careful. HOAs can be vindictive when they don't get their way. I've seen them drag people through hell over the stupidest things." Monday morning, I was under the hood of a 37-foot yellowfin at the Marina, where I worked when my phone started buzzing with emails. The first was from the HOA legal department, a fancy law firm in downtown Tampa, informing me that failure to comply with the boat lift removal order would result in a $500 daily fine starting in 28 days. The second email was from Patricia herself, offering to waive the fine if I removed the lift voluntarily within 2 weeks. I showed the emails to my boss, Tom Rodriguez, who ran the Marina and had been in the marine business for 30 years. Tom was a barrel-chested Cuban guy with a silver beard and permanent sunburn, the kind of man who had forgotten more about boats than most people would ever learn. "That's garbage," Tom said after reading through both messages. "HOA's got no jurisdiction over navigable waters. Your lift is on your dock, which extends into a public waterway. They can complain all they want, but they can't make you remove it. They're threatening liens and fines. Let them try. You got bigger problems, though." Tom's expression turned serious. "You know that dock lease you got through the county? The one for the submerged land under your dock?" I nodded. "In Florida, waterfront property owners typically own the land to the mean high water line, but docks extend over submerged land that's technically state-owned. You had to lease that submerged land through the county and state to legally maintain a dock." "What about it?" I asked. "Just make sure your paperwork is solid. If the HOA wants to play hardball, they're going to look for any angle to come at you. Don't give them ammunition." That evening, I went home and dug through my filing cabinet, pulling out all the documentation related to my dock and boat lift. The county permits were in order. The state environmental permit was current. The homeowner's insurance covered the structure. Everything looked good. Then I found something interesting. When I had purchased the house 5 years ago, the previous owner had included in the sale documents a separate lease agreement for the submerged lands beneath the dock. It was a 99-year lease issued by Hillsborough County back in 1987, renewable and transferable with property ownership. The lease gave the property owner exclusive rights to maintain structures over a specific parcel of submerged land extending into the canal. But there was something else attached to the lease, a document I had barely glanced at during the home purchase because my real estate attorney had assured me everything was standard. It was an amendment dated 1995, 8 years after the original lease, that expanded the leased area to include not just the submerged land under my dock, but a significant portion of the canal itself, approximately 200 feet of waterway extending from my property line. I read through the amendment 3 times, my heart rate accelerating with each pass. According to this document, I didn't just lease the land under my dock. I effectively held the lease rights to a substantial section of the canal, including the water column itself. The amendment had been granted because the previous property owner, a man named Vincent Carlisle, had operated a small private marina serving his property and the 2 adjacent lots. I pulled up a property map on my laptop and traced the boundaries. The original marina had served my current property, and the 2 lots on either side, which had since been subdivided. One of those subdivided lots was now occupied by none other than Patricia Henderson's sprawling 5,000-square-foot Mediterranean-style mansion, with its pristine white stucco and red tile roof. Patricia's dock, which held her husband's cigarette boat and her personal jet skis, extended into the same section of canal covered by my lease. I sat back in my chair, a smile slowly spreading across my face. This changed everything. Tuesday morning, I called the real estate attorney who had handled my home purchase, a sharp woman named Jennifer Kovacs who had an office in South Tampa. I explained the situation with the HOA and asked her to review the canal lease documents. Jennifer called me back within 2 hours. "Aaron, this is fascinating. I've never seen a private canal lease quite like this. You essentially hold riparian rights to that entire section of waterway. The lease is ironclad, granted by the county and approved by the State Environmental Commission. It predates the HOA by a decade." So what does that mean practically? It means the HOA has no authority over structures you place within the leased area. The boat lift is absolutely protected. But more than that, you technically have the right to control access to that section of canal. Anyone with a dock extending into your leased waters is there at your discretion, including Patricia Henderson. Including Patricia Henderson. Jennifer paused. Aaron, I need to be clear about something. You could make things very difficult for her and several other homeowners. But that kind of escalation can get ugly fast. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I thought about Patricia's smug expression, her threats of daily fines and legal action, her dismissive attitude toward my legal rights. I thought about the principle of the thing, the way HOAs seem to exist primarily to make people's lives miserable over nonsense. She started this, I said. I'm just going to finish it. Jennifer agreed to draft a formal response to the HOA's demands, outlining my legal position and making it clear that any attempt to fine me or place a lien on my property would be met with immediate legal action. She also prepared a separate letter to be sent to Patricia Henderson personally, informing her that her dock structures were technically operating within my leased canal area without explicit written permission. Wednesday afternoon, Jennifer's letters were delivered via certified mail. I was at the Marina working on a repower job, installing twin outboards on a fishing boat, when my phone exploded with angry text messages. The first was from Patricia. This is harassment and abuse of legal process. You will be hearing from our attorneys. The second was from a number I didn't recognize. You can't seriously think you can control public waterways. This is America. The third was from Marcus. Dude, what did you do? The HOA group chat is losing their minds. I wiped the engine oil off my hands and called Jennifer. Did you expect this kind of reaction, honestly? Yes. You just informed a control freak that she doesn't actually control what she thought she controlled. People like Patricia don't handle that well. She sounded amused. The HOA's attorney already called me. They're demanding a meeting. What did you tell them? I told them we're happy to meet, but your position is non-negotiable. The boat lift stays, and any attempt to penalize you will result in a lawsuit for harassment and interference with legal property rights. Thursday morning brought the meeting. It was held at the Sunset Cove Community Clubhouse, a renovated building near the entrance of the neighborhood that usually hosted yoga classes and book clubs. The room they led me into was set up like a makeshift courtroom, with the 5-member HOA board seated at a long table on one side and chairs for me and Jennifer on the other. Patricia sat in the center of the board, flanked by 4 other middle-aged homeowners who all wore similar expressions of rehearsed concern. The HOA's attorney was a youngish guy named Brad something, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my boat. He started with a lengthy speech about community standards and the importance of maintaining property values, speaking in the kind of corporate drone that made my teeth ache. Jennifer let him finish, then calmly placed a document binder on the table. My client's position is simple. Mr. Langford holds a valid legal lease for the submerged lands and water column in the canal section, adjacent to his property. This lease predates the HOA's existence and grants him explicit rights to maintain structures within the leased area, including but not limited to his boat lift. The HOA has no authority to override a county-issued lease approved by state environmental regulators. Brad tried to argue that the HOA covenants superseded the lease, but Jennifer shut him down with case law. She cited 3 Florida Supreme Court decisions establishing that riparian rights and state-issued leases took precedence over HOA restrictions. She pointed out that the HOA's own founding documents acknowledged existing easements and legal encumbrances on properties within the community. Patricia's face was getting redder by the minute. This is absurd. One homeowner cannot hold an entire section of community waterway hostage. It's not community waterway, Jennifer replied evenly. It's state waterway that my client leases from Hillsborough County. There's a significant legal difference. One of the other board members, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, spoke up. What exactly are you proposing here? That we just accept this situation? I'm proposing that the HOA withdraw its demands regarding the boat lift and acknowledge Mr. Langford's legal rights, Jennifer said. In exchange, Mr. Langford will continue to allow existing dock structures to remain in the leased area without requiring separate permission agreements. That's it, Patricia's voice was sharp. He gets to keep his eyesore and we get nothing. You get to avoid a lawsuit you would lose, Jennifer said pleasantly. I'd say that's something. The meeting devolved from there. Patricia refused to accept the situation, insisting there had to be some legal avenue to force me to remove the boat lift. Brad looked increasingly uncomfortable as Jennifer methodically destroyed every argument he attempted. The other board members seemed split between those who wanted to cut their losses and those who were loyal to Patricia's crusade. Finally, Jennifer stood up. Gentlemen, Mrs. Henderson, we've made our position clear. If the HOA wishes to pursue this matter further, we'll see you in court. But I should mention that Florida law allows for recovery of attorney's fees in cases of frivolous HOA enforcement actions. Keep that in mind. We left the clubhouse and walked to our cars in the parking lot. The afternoon was hot and humid, typical for Tampa in late spring, with thunderheads building on the eastern horizon. How do you think that went? I asked. Jennifer smiled. They're going to drop it. Brad knows they don't have a case, and the rest of the board doesn't want to waste money on legal fees. Patricia's the only one who seems personally invested, and she'll get outvoted eventually. And if she doesn't, then we file a countersuit for harassment and abuse of process, and we win. Jennifer unlocked her car, a sensible hybrid sedan. Trust me, Aaron, you've got all the leverage here. I wanted to believe her, but I had learned not to underestimate the vindictiveness of people with too much time and too little perspective. Patricia Henderson struck me as exactly the type who would burn down her own house to spite someone she didn't like. I was right. Friday evening, I came home from work to find a code enforcement officer from Hillsborough County standing on my dock with a clipboard. He was a tired-looking guy in his 50s wearing a county polo shirt and cargo shorts. "Aaron Langford?" he asked. "That's me. I'm Dan Phillips with County Code Enforcement. We received a complaint about unpermitted construction on this property. I need to inspect your boat lift." I felt a spike of anger but kept my voice calm. "The lift is fully permitted. I can show you all the documentation." "I'd appreciate that." I brought Dan inside and pulled out my file cabinet, showing him every permit, inspection certificate, and approval letter related to the boat lift. He photographed each document with his phone, taking his time to verify everything. "This all looks good," Dan said finally. "Mind if I ask who filed the complaint?" "I can guess. HOA president. We're in a dispute about the lift." Dan sighed, the sound of a man who had dealt with this exact situation too many times. "Yeah, that tracks. I'll file my report stating everything is compliant and permitted. The complaint will be closed." He handed me a business card. "If you get any more county inspectors showing up, have them call me first. I'll let them know it's a waste of time." "Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it." After he left, I called Jennifer and told her about the code enforcement visit. She made a note in the file and said it was more evidence of harassment if we needed to pursue legal action. But I was getting tired of the whole situation. I just wanted to fish and work on boats and be left alone. The weekend passed without incident, which should have been a warning sign. Monday afternoon, I was in my garage organizing tools when I heard shouting from the direction of the water. I walked down to the dock and found Patricia standing on the seawall between our properties, pointing at something near my boat lift. "What's wrong?" I called out, genuinely concerned. "Your lift is leaking hydraulic fluid into the canal," she shouted back. "This is an environmental disaster. I'm calling the state." I climbed down to the lift and inspected every hydraulic line, every fitting, every connection. There was no leak. The system was bone dry, exactly as it should be. I stood up and looked at Patricia, who was watching with her phone already pressed to her ear. "There's no leak," I said clearly. "Everything is dry. I saw it this morning. Oil slick all through the water." She was already talking to someone on the phone, reporting an environmental spill. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't about the boat lift anymore. This was personal vendetta. Patricia was manufacturing complaints, trying to bury me under layers of bogus investigations and enforcement actions. The state environmental officer showed up Tuesday morning. She was more thorough than the county inspector, using test strips to check the water quality around my dock and bringing specialized lights to detect petroleum products. After an hour of investigation, she declared the water clean and found no evidence of any hydraulic leak. "False report," she said, filling out her paperwork on the hood of her truck. "I have to file these regardless, and repeat false reports can result in fines for the person making them. Would you be willing to include that in your report?" I asked. "Already did." She closed her notebook. "You're all good here, Mr. Langford. Nice boat lift, by the way. Clean installation." I thanked her and went inside to call Jennifer again. She listened to my account of the false environmental report and said something I didn't expect. "Aaron, we need to go on a fence. Patricia is engaging in a pattern of harassment that's starting to border on illegal. I want to file a cease and desist letter and pursue a restraining order if she doesn't stop." "Isn't that extreme?" "She filed a false report with a state agency. That's a crime. She's using government resources to harass you over a personal dispute. If we don't push back hard, she's just going to keep escalating." I agreed, and Jennifer prepared the paperwork. The cease and desist letter was delivered Wednesday afternoon. It outlined every action Patricia had taken, from the original boat lift complaint through the false environmental report, and demanded that she stop all contact with me and cease any further complaints to government agencies regarding my property unless she had genuine, documented evidence of violations. Thursday morning, I was served with a lawsuit. The Sunset Cove Homeowners Association, represented by Brad the attorney, was suing me for willful violation of community covenants and seeking an injunction to force removal of the boat lift, plus $20,000 in damages for diminished community property values and legal expenses. I sat in my truck in the Marina parking lot, reading through the lawsuit documents, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. This was exactly what I had been trying to avoid. Now I was going to be spending thousands on legal fees, wasting time in court, all because Patricia Henderson decided my boat lift offended her aesthetic sensibilities. I forwarded everything to Jennifer and called her. They actually sued. I see that. She sounded more energized than worried. "This is good for us, actually. Now we can conduct discovery and get all their internal communications. I want to see every email, every text message, every board meeting minute related to this boat lift. I guarantee we're going to find evidence of selective enforcement and personal animus." "How much is this going to cost me?" "More than it should. But we're going to file a counterclaim for harassment, abuse of process, and interference with property rights. When we win, they'll have to pay your attorney's fees. When we win, Aaron, they don't have a case. The lease is bulletproof. We're going to dismantle them in court." Jennifer's confidence was reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this whole situation was spiraling out of control. What had started as a simple dispute about a boat lift was now a full-blown legal battle that was going to consume months of my life. The discovery process was revealing. Jennifer subpoenaed the HOA's records, and what came back was damning. Internal emails showed that Patricia had personally pushed for the boat lift complaint, despite several other board members expressing doubt about whether they had grounds to enforce. Text messages showed her coordinating with 2 other homeowners to file multiple complaints with different government agencies, essentially trying to weaponize code enforcement against me. Most damning was an email from Patricia to Brad, the attorney, sent before they ever contacted me about the boat lift, in which she wrote, "This guy Langford has always been weird and standoffish. It's time someone taught him that you have to play by the rules in this community. Find me a reason to make him fall in line." Jennifer filed that email as Exhibit A in our counterclaim. She also deposed Patricia, and according to the transcript, it didn't go well for the HOA president. Patricia was evasive, contradicted herself multiple times, and finally admitted under questioning that she had never actually measured any impact of the boat lift on property values, and had based her entire complaint on community feedback that she couldn't substantiate. The court date was set for October, which meant months of waiting and legal maneuvering. In the meantime, life went on. I continued working at the Marina, continued fishing on weekends, and tried to ignore the tension that now permeated the neighborhood. Some residents clearly sided with Patricia, giving me cold looks when I drove past. Others, like Marcus, were supportive and expressed frustration with the HOA's overreach. One evening in July, I was on my dock cleaning the Grady White when a boat pulled up to the seawall. It was a center console I recognized from a few houses down, piloted by a woman named Linda Walsh, who I knew casually from the community. She was in her early 40s, worked as a nurse, and had always struck me as sensible. "Aaron, you got a minute?" Linda called out. I tossed her a dock line and she tied off the boat. She climbed onto the seawall, looking uncomfortable. "What's up?" I asked. "I need to tell you something, and it's probably going to make you angry." Linda took a breath. "Patricia has been going door to door trying to get people to sign a petition. She's claiming that your canal lease gives you the right to block boat traffic or charge fees for people to use the waterway. She's telling people you're going to turn the canal into a private toll road." I stared at her. "That's completely false. I have no interest in restricting anyone's access to the canal." "I know. That's why I'm telling you. Some people are believing her, though. She's good at spinning things to make herself look like the victim." Linda glanced back at her boat. "I didn't sign the petition, and I told several other neighbors not to sign either. But you should know what she's saying about you." "I appreciate you telling me." After Linda left, I called Jennifer and relayed the conversation. She made notes and said it was more evidence of defamation and harassment. She also suggested I write a letter to all the homeowners in Sunset Cove, explaining my actual position and making clear that I had no intention of interfering with anyone's water access. I spent an evening drafting the letter, trying to strike a balance between defending myself and not sounding defensive. I explained the history of the canal lease, clarified that it had existed since before the HOA was formed, and explicitly stated that I welcomed all community members to continue using the waterway as they always had. I emphasized that my only goal was to maintain my legal boat lift without HOA interference. Jennifer reviewed the letter, made some minor edits, and we sent copies to every address in Sunset Cove. The response was mixed. I got several supportive emails from neighbors who said they appreciated the clarification and thought the HOA was overreaching. I also got one unsigned letter that was basically hate mail, calling me selfish and suggesting I should move if I didn't want to follow community rules. August brought a heat wave that made working at the Marina almost unbearable. The shop wasn't air-conditioned, and temperatures inside regularly topped 100 degrees. I spent my days drenched in sweat, rebuilding engines and trying to stay hydrated. The legal battle with the HOA faded into background noise, something I thought about mainly when Jennifer called with updates. One afternoon, Tom called me into his cramped office and shut the door. "I got a weird phone call this morning. Woman asking questions about you, whether you're reliable, do you have financial problems, that kind of thing. Said she was doing background for an employment verification." "You don't verify employment for anyone but lenders," I said. "Exactly." I told her I don't give out information about employees and hung up, but I thought you should know someone's digging into your life. I felt a chill despite the heat. Did she give a name? Nope. Caller ID said private number. I called Jennifer and told her about the call. She was quiet for a moment, then said something that made my stomach drop. "Aaron, this is getting concerning. If Patricia is hiring private investigators or trying to dig up dirt on you, we're beyond simple HOA dispute territory. This is harassment that could potentially be criminal." "What do I do?" "Document everything. If you get any more weird calls or notices, let me know immediately, and be careful. People who get this obsessed with winning can do unpredictable things." That night, I sat on my dock watching the sunset and wondering how a simple boat lift had turned into this mess. The water was calm, reflecting the orange and pink sky like a mirror. A dolphin surfaced near the opposite shore, its fin cutting through the water with effortless grace. It should have been peaceful, but I felt a knot of anxiety in my chest that wouldn't go away. September brought cooler weather and the approach of the court date. Jennifer had filed multiple motions, and the judge had ruled in our favor on most of them, striking down the HOA's attempts to limit discovery and compel early removal of the boat lift. The legal momentum seemed to be swinging our way, but Jennifer cautioned against overconfidence. "Patricia is desperate," she told me during a meeting at her office. "Her reputation is on the line, and she's already invested thousands of the HOA's money into this lawsuit. She's going to fight until the bitter end." "What's our strategy for trial?" "Simple. We present the canal lease and the legal precedents establishing that riparian rights supersede HOA covenants. We show the pattern of harassment and selective enforcement. We let Patricia's own words condemn her." Jennifer leaned back in her chair. "The judge we drew is good. He's not going to be impressed by the HOA's overreach." The trial was scheduled for October 15th. As the date approached, I found myself sleeping poorly, running through scenarios and arguments in my head. I had never been involved in a lawsuit before, and the stress was eating at me in ways I hadn't anticipated. 1 week before trial, something happened that changed everything. I was at home on a Saturday morning when I heard sirens on the street. I looked out my front window and saw fire trucks and police cars pulled up in front of Patricia Henderson's house. Smoke was billowing from the attached garage. I grabbed my phone and walked outside, joining a crowd of neighbors who had gathered to watch. The firefighters had the blaze under control quickly, but the garage was gutted. As the smoke cleared, I overheard one of the fire investigators talking to a police officer. Words like accelerant and point of origin drifted across the lawn. Patricia was standing near the street, wrapped in a blanket, talking to the police. Her husband, a tall man I had only seen a few times, was with her. They both looked shaken, Marcus appeared at my elbow. "That's crazy. Wonder what happened." "Sounds like it might not have been an accident," I said quietly. Over the next few days, the story came together through neighborhood gossip and a few articles in the local news. The fire had been deliberately set. Someone had broken into the garage and used gasoline to start the blaze. The investigation was ongoing, but the police had recovered a partial fingerprint and were reviewing security camera footage from nearby houses. I felt genuinely bad for Patricia, despite everything. Having your home damaged and knowing someone deliberately targeted you was a violation that went beyond any legal dispute. I actually considered sending a sympathy card, but decided it would probably come across as insincere given our situation. The trial date arrived. I put on my one decent suit, a navy blue number I had bought for my father's funeral 3 years ago, and met Jennifer at the courthouse in downtown Tampa. The building was an imposing structure of stone and glass, busy with people rushing between courtrooms and offices. Our case was scheduled for 9 in the morning in a third-floor courtroom. Judge Robert Martinez presided, a stern-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and an air of no-nonsense competence. The courtroom was mostly empty, except for the parties involved and a few observers. Patricia was there with Brad and 2 of the other HOA board members. She looked tired, older than she had when this started, and I felt an unexpected twinge of sympathy before remembering why we were all here. The trial proceeded with opening statements. Brad argued that the HOA covenants were clear, that aesthetic standards applied to all homeowners equally, and that allowing my boat lift to remain would set a precedent that would undermine the entire structure of community governance. He showed photos of the lift from multiple angles, emphasizing its visibility and arguing that it negatively impacted the community's visual harmony. Jennifer's opening was crisp and factual. She presented the canal lease, explained its legal history, and cited the precedents establishing that state-issued riparian rights superseded HOA restrictions. She then pivoted to the harassment angle, outlining Patricia's pattern of conduct and arguing that the HOA's actions were motivated by personal animus rather than legitimate community concerns. The judge listened impassively, taking occasional notes. We spent the morning on testimony. Brad called Patricia to the stand first, and she gave a rehearsed speech about property values and community standards. Jennifer's cross-examination was surgical. She walked Patricia through every action she had taken, from the original complaint through the false environmental report, getting her to admit that she had never actually assessed any real impact of the boat lift on property values. Mrs. Henderson, in your email to the HOA attorney, you wrote that Mr. Langford needed to be taught to fall in line. Can you explain what you meant by that? Jennifer asked. Patricia stammered. I meant that everyone in the community needs to follow the rules. But Mr. Langford was following the rules. He had all the proper permits and approvals for his boat lift. Isn't it true that you were upset he wouldn't defer to your personal opinion about what looks appropriate? That's not fair. Please answer the question, Mrs. Henderson. The judge intervened. Mrs. Henderson, you need to answer. Patricia's face was red. I believe the boat lift was inappropriate for our community. Based on what objective standard, based on the feedback I received from other homeowners? Can you name these homeowners? Patricia couldn't. It became clear through Jennifer's questioning that the complaints had been vague and possibly exaggerated. The whole case was unraveling. Brad tried to recover with his other witnesses, calling 2 homeowners who testified that the boat lift bothered them. Jennifer destroyed both on cross-examination, getting them to admit they had docks in the same canal and had never complained about anyone else's marine equipment. After lunch, Jennifer called me to the stand. She walked me through the history of buying my house, discovering the canal lease, and installing the boat lift. I explained my work as a marine mechanic and my passion for fishing. I kept my answers straightforward and honest. Brad's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to paint me as someone who deliberately antagonized the HOA, who refused to be a team player, who cared more about my personal convenience than the community good. I stayed calm and repeated that I had simply followed the law and exercised my legal rights. "Mr. Langford, if you had known your boat lift would upset your neighbors, would you still have installed it?" Brad asked. "Yes," I said, "because I have the legal right to do so, and it's a standard piece of marine equipment, even if it harmed your neighbor's property values." "There's no evidence it harmed anyone's property values. That's pure speculation." The trial wrapped up late in the afternoon. Judge Martinez announced he would review the evidence and issue a written ruling within 2 weeks. We all filed out of the courtroom exhausted. Jennifer and I grabbed coffee at a shop across the street. "I think that went well," she said. "The judge seemed skeptical of their whole case. What happens now? We wait. But I'm confident, Aaron, you've got the law on your side." The waiting was agonizing. I threw myself into work at the Marina, picking up extra projects to keep my mind occupied. Tom noticed my distraction and gave me space, only occasionally asking how things were going. 10 days after the trial, Jennifer called. "We won. Complete victory." The judge dismissed the HOA's case with prejudice, meaning they can't refile. He also awarded you attorney's fees and costs, plus damages for harassment. I sat down hard on a workbench, relief flooding through me. "How much?" $35,000 plus your legal costs." The judge wrote a scathing opinion about the HOA's conduct. He specifically called out Patricia for abuse of process and said the HOA board failed in its duty to prevent selective enforcement. What does this mean practically? It means the boat lift stays. The HOA can't touch it. And you'll get reimbursed for having to defend yourself. It also means Patricia's credibility as HOA president is destroyed. I thanked Jennifer profusely and hung up. I sat in the Marina shop, surrounded by the smell of engine oil and fiberglass, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. The aftermath was interesting. Patricia resigned as HOA president a week after the ruling was announced. According to Marcus, the rest of the board had basically forced her out, unwilling to risk further legal liability from her crusades. A special election was held, and a retired engineer named David Kim took over as president. His first official act was to issue a formal apology to me and revise the HOA's enforcement procedures to require legal review before taking action against homeowners. The fire at Patricia's house turned out to have a surprising connection to the whole saga. The police arrested a man named Craig Henderson, Patricia's younger brother, who had apparently set the fire in a bizarre attempt to generate sympathy for his sister. He was motivated by some twisted logic that if Patricia appeared to be a victim, it would help her legal case against me. The man clearly had issues, and he was charged with arson and insurance fraud. Patricia and her husband moved out of Sunset Cove 3 months later. I heard through the grapevine that they relocated to South Carolina, looking for a fresh start. I never spoke to her again. Life returned to normal slowly. The $35,000 in damages covered my legal fees and left enough for me to upgrade my fishing gear and take a long weekend trip to the Keys. The boat lift remained exactly where it was, gleaming in the sun, a monument to standing up for your rights even when it's inconvenient. Marcus and I resumed our early morning coffee routine on the seawall. The manatees continued to visit the canal. I caught fish and fixed boats and enjoyed the simple pleasure of living on the water without someone constantly trying to make my life difficult. One Saturday morning, about 6 months after the trial, I was on my dock doing maintenance on the boat lift when a family of 3 pulled up in a small center console. They were clearly new to the area, looking a bit lost. "Excuse me," the father called out. "We just moved into the neighborhood." "Is this canal open for boat traffic?" "Absolutely," I said. "Welcome to Sunset Cove." "Thanks. Nice boat lift, by the way." I smiled. "Thanks. It caused quite a bit of trouble, but it was worth it." They motored away, and I went back to work on the hydraulics. The sun was warm on my back, the water was clear and calm, and everything was exactly as it should be. The battle had been exhausting and frustrating, but it had taught me something important about standing firm when you're in the right. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondering if she had learned anything from the experience or if she was just looking for a new community to control. I hoped for her sake that she had found some perspective, but I wasn't optimistic. People like that rarely changed. The HOA under David Kim's leadership was significantly better. They focused on actual community issues like road maintenance and storm drainage rather than policing everyone's aesthetic choices. Dues went to practical improvements rather than legal fees. The neighborhood felt more relaxed, less like everyone was walking on eggshells waiting for the next arbitrary enforcement action. I even attended a few HOA meetings, something I had never done before. It was important to stay informed and make sure the organization didn't slide back into overreach. Other homeowners seemed to share that sentiment. The meetings were actually productive, focused on budgets and real problems rather than petty disputes. One interesting outcome of the whole situation was that several other homeowners discovered they had similar lease arrangements for submerged lands. The waterfront properties in Sunset Cove had a complex legal history, with various easements and rights that predated the HOA. David Kim worked with a real estate attorney to document all these arrangements and update the HOA records accordingly. It prevented future conflicts and gave everyone clarity about their actual rights. The following summer, I upgraded to a larger boat, a 28-foot contender with twin Yamaha outboards. It was a significant investment, but after the stress of the previous year, I felt like I deserved it. The boat lift handled the additional weight without any issues, and I spent long weekends running offshore to the wrecks and reefs west of Tampa Bay. Fishing became therapy. There was something meditative about being on the water, away from people and problems, focused on nothing more complicated than reading the current and finding where the fish were holding. I caught kingfish and grouper, amberjack and cobia, sometimes keeping a few for dinner, but mostly releasing them to fight another day. Tom eventually promoted me to shop manager at the Marina, a role that came with more responsibility but also more autonomy. I hired 2 young mechanics who reminded me of myself at that age, hungry to learn and willing to put in the work. Teaching them about marine engines and systems was surprisingly satisfying. It felt good to pass on knowledge, to help someone else develop skills they could use for a lifetime. The legal victory over the HOA even had professional benefits. Word spread through the marine community about the case, and I got approached by several boat owners who had dealt with similar HOA problems. I connected them with Jennifer, who started specializing in waterfront property disputes. She joked that I had accidentally launched an entire practice area for her firm. 2 years after the trial, I was elected to the Sunset Cove HOA board. It was ironic given how much I had despised the organization, but I felt obligated to serve. The best way to prevent another Patricia Henderson from taking over was to stay involved and keep the board grounded in practical reality. Serving on the board gave me new appreciation for how difficult community governance could be. There were legitimate issues that needed attention: aging infrastructure, storm preparation, insurance costs that were skyrocketing due to Florida's climate challenges. Balancing different homeowners' interests and priorities was genuinely hard work. But I also saw how easy it would be for the board to slide into petty enforcement and aesthetic policing if people weren't careful. Every meeting, someone would suggest a new rule or restriction, often aimed at controlling some behavior they personally found annoying. I made it my mission to push back against anything that wasn't clearly necessary for community function or safety. Marcus joined the board a year after I did, and together we formed a practical coalition that kept the HOA focused on its core responsibilities. We weren't always popular. Some homeowners wanted stricter rules and more enforcement, but most people appreciated that we kept dues reasonable and didn't waste time on nonsense. The boat lift remained my favorite part of the property. I maintained it meticulously, keeping the hydraulics in perfect condition and the metal free from corrosion. It became a point of pride, this structure that had caused so much conflict but ultimately represented something important: the right to use your property legally without arbitrary interference. I never forgot the lesson of that whole experience. HOAs and similar organizations could serve important functions, but they required constant vigilance to prevent them from becoming tools of petty tyranny. Property rights mattered. Due process mattered. And sometimes you had to fight, even when it was expensive and stressful, because giving in to unreasonable demands just encouraged more unreasonable demands. Life on the water in Sunset Cove was good. The canal teemed with marine life, from mullet and snook to rays and the occasional small shark. Birds hunted from the pilings and mangroves. The sunsets remained spectacular. And my boat lift, the infamous structure that had sparked a legal war, stood strong and functional, doing exactly what it was designed to do. On quiet mornings, I would stand on my dock with coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the bay and feel grateful for all of it. The house, the water, the boat, the hard-won peace. Patricia Henderson had tried to force me out, to make me bend to her will through intimidation and legal threats. Instead, she had lost everything while I gained something valuable: the knowledge that standing firm in the face of bullying, even institutional bullying, was possible and worthwhile. The marine industry continued to evolve. Electric outboards started gaining market share. Composite materials became more common in boat construction. I kept up with the technology, attending trade shows and taking manufacturer training courses. The Marina thrived under Tom's leadership, and my role as shop manager gave me satisfaction that went beyond just a paycheck. Jennifer Kovacs and I stayed in touch. She would occasionally call with questions about other waterfront property cases, picking my brain about technical aspects of docks and boats. She had built a thriving practice representing homeowners against overreaching HOAs, and she credited our case as the foundation of that success. I was proud to have played a part in helping other people stand up for their rights. The Sunset Cove community continued to grow and change. Young families moved in as older residents relocated or passed away. The neighborhood became more diverse, more dynamic. The HOA evolved with it, focusing less on enforcement and more on fostering community connection. Block parties and holiday events replaced the atmosphere of suspicion and control that had characterized Patricia's tenure. I even started dating someone I met at a marina industry event, a woman named Laura Williams who owned a boat dealership in Clearwater. She understood the appeal of life on the water, shared my passion for fishing, and had her own horror stories about dealing with difficult clients and bureaucratic nonsense. We took it slow, spending weekends exploring Florida's Gulf Coast by boat, discovering new fishing spots and waterfront restaurants. Laura saw the boat lift for the first time about 3 months into our relationship. I told her the whole story over dinner one evening, and she listened with an expression that shifted from amusement to outrage to satisfaction as the narrative unfolded. "You're kind of a local legend," she said when I finished. "People in the marine industry talk about the guy who fought his HOA over riparian rights and won." "I just wanted to fish," I said. "You wanted to stand up for yourself. That's rare. Most people would have caved." Maybe she was right. Looking back, I could see multiple points where I could have backed down, removed the lift, avoided the conflict. It would have been easier in the short term. But I would have lost something important: self-respect and the knowledge that I wouldn't be pushed around by petty bureaucrats wielding their tiny bit of power like tyrants. The canal lease itself became something of a curiosity. After the case became public, the county received multiple inquiries about similar historical leases. It turned out that quite a few existed, mostly forgotten relics from an earlier era when waterfront development was less regulated. Some homeowners discovered they had rights they didn't know about. Others learned their docks were technically on leased land owned by neighbors. David Kim, the new HOA president, proposed creating a comprehensive map of all easements, leases, and riparian rights in Sunset Cove. It was a massive undertaking, requiring title searches and legal research, but when completed, it gave everyone clarity about property boundaries and rights. It was exactly the kind of practical, useful project an HOA should undertake. Years passed. The boat lift aged gracefully, requiring only routine maintenance. I replaced the contender with a custom center console built by a small outfit in the Keys, a beautiful fishing machine designed for my specific needs. The lift handled it perfectly, and I spent countless hours on the water pursuing my passion. Marcus's kids grew up and moved away to college. My relationship with Laura deepened into something permanent, though we kept separate houses because we both valued our independence. Tom retired from the Marina and sold it to a management company that kept me on as shop manager. Life continued its steady rhythm of work and fishing and community involvement. The HOA never bothered me about the boat lift again. In fact, it became something of a neighborhood landmark, the famous structure that had sparked a legal battle and won. New residents would sometimes ask about it, and older residents would tell the story with varying degrees of accuracy. I didn't mind. It was part of the community history now. Patricia Henderson became a cautionary tale, the HOA president who let personal vendetta override common sense, and ended up costing the association tens of thousands in legal fees and damages. Future board members would reference her as an example of what not to do. It was a harsh legacy, but she had earned it through her own choices. I never found out if she learned anything from the experience. Her brother Craig served 18 months in prison for the arson and was released on probation. According to Marcus, who followed these things more closely than I did, the whole family had scattered after the incident, avoiding Tampa and the memories associated with their time in Sunset Cove. Sometimes, I would stand on my dock in the evening, watching dolphins hunt in the canal, and think about how a simple boat lift had changed my life in unexpected ways. It had cost me money and stress, but it had also given me confidence, connections, and a deeper understanding of property rights and community dynamics. It had taught me to stand firm in the face of intimidation and to fight back against unreasonable demands. The Florida sun would set in spectacular colors, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. My boat would rest securely on its lift, protected from barnacles and bottom growth. And I would feel a deep sense of contentment, knowing that this place was truly mine, legally and legitimately, defended in court and secured through perseverance. Life on the water was exactly what I had always wanted. The boat lift made that life easier and more practical, protecting my investment and simplifying maintenance. That it had become a symbol of standing up to HOA overreach was just a bonus. I hadn't set out to be anyone's hero or to make a point about property rights. I had just wanted to keep my boat in good condition and enjoy my weekends fishing. But sometimes the most important stands are the ones you don't plan to make. Sometimes refusing to back down from a minor dispute reveals larger principles worth defending. Patricia Henderson had thought she could bully me into compliance through bureaucratic pressure and legal threats. Instead, she had learned an expensive lesson about the limits of HOA authority and the danger of letting personal feelings drive institutional decisions. The boat lift stood as a monument to that lesson, visible from multiple properties, a gleaming reminder that property rights matter and that individual homeowners can successfully challenge overreaching associations when they're clearly in the right. It served its practical function every day, protecting my boat from the harsh marine environment. But it also served a symbolic function, reminding everyone in Sunset Cove that rules have limits and that those limits should be respected. As the stars came out over Tampa Bay and the nighttime sounds of the water surrounded me, I felt grateful for all of it. The house, the dock, the boat, the community, and yes, even the infamous boat lift that had started everything. It had been worth fighting for, worth defending, worth the stress and expense and aggravation. Because in the end, it represented something fundamental: the right to live peacefully on your own property without arbitrary interference from those who think they know better. The water lapped gently against the pilings. A mullet jumped somewhere in the darkness. And I stood on my dock, master of my small piece of paradise, protected by law and secured by determination, exactly where I was supposed to be.